Hello, everybody, and welcome to another awesome episode of the Wealth Preservation Podcast. I am Joshua Saunders. I'm here with my trusted sidekick, Mark Scyther. Mark, how are you today, man?
I'm doing fantastic.
Awesome.
Beautiful Friday, Friday morning.
Here in California. We have a pretty awesome podcast for you today. We have Mr. Jeff Stevens from GVM Law. We're going to be talking about some transition and family business planning and some corporate structures, stuff that we all find really interesting, and we hope that you do too. So we're excited to have Jeff. Jeff, how are you today?
I'm great. Thank you, both of you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for being here. So let's kind of kick this off and go, where are you from? Who is attorney Jeff Stevens? And we'll go from there. So kind of give us your background.
Sure. Okay. Jeff Stevens, my wife and I moved to Rockland a few years ago. I'm with the firm GVM Law. And it's a firm that's been around for about 40 years in Napa, and now we have an office in Roseville. And
awesome.
So I get to kind of head out and be the first mover here in the area for the firm.
So what does GVM stand for?
So it's a second generation firm.
Okay.
GVM was once upon a time Gaw and Van Male. Those were the initial founders.
Okay.
And so now we're next generation, so it's rebranded, for the long term.
Plain old GVM?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Perfect.
GVM. Yep, Golf Victor Mike. Yeah, GVM.
Perfect. Awesome. Yeah. So were you born and raised around here, or did you somewhere else?
Yeah, from Utah originally.
Okay.
Born in Washington, raised in Utah.
Okay.
But went to UCLA for law school.
Very cool.
Met my wife there. She's a nurse practitioner.
Very cool.
Very, very smart. We started the family in Thousand Oaks, moved to Napa, started with GVM there, and now in Roseville.
There are worse places to land than Napa. I'm just going to let you know.
Yeah.
I mean,
well, that's
great
how
move.
we've gone from, West LA to Thousand Oaks to Napa to, we're kind of making the, we call it the, tour of the kind of hot spots
of California.
Maybe
no
we'll
kidding.
retire in Santa Barbara and we'll,
So I grew up, my grandparents lived right over from Thousand Oaks in Camarillo, there at the golf course when you come down to Conejo Grade, so I'm very familiar. We used to go to the Thousand Oaks Mall for Christmas shop every year.
It's a nice mall.
Yeah.
Yep. Great place.
Yeah, and their Kardashians are close by, which is super exciting. I'm sure you hung out with them quite a bit.
From time to time. We'd let them come over.
When they needed good legal advice, they'd be like, hey, Jeff,
I'm in trouble again. Well, now Kim is going to, have her own practice.
That's true. She is going to go to law school, allegedly. So
yeah, maybe we'll partner up.
Yeah, you never know. She could be, a good partner.
Right on.
There's a lot of jokes we could go into that.
Yeah.
I'll leave that one alone. We'll leave that one alone. We could trust
just
in
let me know.
states,
We'll
probably
asset
cut-
protection.
yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Awesome. So let's kind of talk about what GVM does and kind of what your specialty is. But on the business side, what does GVM kind of do, and what are your guys' kind of specialty?
Yeah, thank you. So we've gotten a chance to work with a lot of families and business owners.
Okay.
And so some of the attorneys at the firm handle the deals and kind of in-house counsel for corporate stuff.
Sure.
We've got an attorney that does employment advice and counsel to keep things square for the business on that front. And then I get to work in the trust and estates and tax area. So it's some of these families have heard about, how are these wealthy families across, how do they move things to the next generation?
Right.
And that's where we
Because
get
it's very
to come
complicated.
in.
It's not like an easy, you don't just write them a check and walk away. There's lots of implications in there.
That's exactly right. So it's kind of there's personal considerations, there's financial, kind of what's good for the business long term, and then there's how do you minimize taxes in all of that, right? Yeah.
So does GVM kind of act as like as you said, like an in-house counsel? Because a lot of these wealthier families, they kind of want a concierge because they have a lot of issues coming up all the time. It's not like it's if you have wealth and money, you have a lot of issues coming up just to protect and keep those dollars.
Yeah, that's totally true. So on my end, it's an ongoing relationship often.
Right.
Even once they sign some documents, it's ongoing advice.
Sure.
Assets change, circumstances change, and laws change.
Right.
And then, some of my partners, they start doing a deal, and then they start giving advice, and then, they're effectively the in-house counsel over the years.
Right.
And I think that, we're always appreciative of that and that relationship. And, when we're trusted like that, we want to deliver and provide some service and some value. And that's when it works the best.
Perfect. So,
I was going to say, because it's Napa Valley, that's where the firm, still is and has been for a long time. Obviously, when there's some sort of expansion, they do a lot of research. So coming up here, what were some of the reasons they picked to like, hey, this is probably going to be a good area for us to move next and really move you into the area?
I mean, it wasn't because our firm was across the street. That's probably not why you guys moved here.
That's what put it over the edge.
Oh, okay, good. Thank you.
We're just right next door to the building here. But Part of it was finding the right local attorney to partner with. And so Frank Martirana, he joined the firm last year. He had a practice longstanding in Roseville. And so part of it was finding the right demographic and area. So the same way there's wealth tied up in vines and wineries in Napa, that same sort of agriculture and family wealth is here in the Sacramento Valley. And Frank, he had a practice that went through Sacramento Valley up into Humboldt. So you get timber and manufacturing and family businesses that need that kind of work. So it was a nice pairing of what we were starting to focus on and looking to grow into, and what he was able to bring to the table also.
Gotcha.
So, kind of a natural pairing.
Yeah, so let's kind of walk into that. Let's talk about kind of the wine business, not necessarily the nuts and bolts of the wine business, but what are some of the on the ag front, because that's it's part of ag, but what are some of the nuances that are kind of in that wine business? I know a lot of families own a winery. The joke, I guess, from the winery business is it's a great way to make a big fortune into a small fortune is to buy a winery. But what are some of those?
That's true.
But what are some of those nuances about some of that planning? Because you're working with usually wealthier families that own wineries, because it's not cheap to buy real estate in Napa. I don't know if you know that or not, but it's pretty expensive.
Right.
But then also
through the roof
to produce the grapes and all that kind of stuff. It's a big process. So what are kind of some of those nuances to doing that?
Yeah. So I guess on our front, what I could say there is, these properties, and this isn't true for every client, but for a lot of these are generational assets, right? This is, grandparents started this, and made it into a farm. The next generation turned it into a winery, and now third, it's, now turned into something substantial.
It's almost like they built a brand basically for some of these, right?
Yeah, and turned into a brand. And with maybe the last 25 years, Napa kind of really became on the map, very prominent.
Right.
Maybe 35 years. But anyway, so it's not just like any other business where maybe the owner just treats it like, cash or wealth. Right. This is something where they have established a legacy. And they want to continue that. Right. So they're not just looking for how they can cash out. Right. But it's, generations in the future also.
Right. I mean, it's something you want to pass on. Usually it's their name on the label, right? Their family name on the label in some form. That's and right. It's kind of their identity is who they are. It's not just a dollars and cents. This is I have an investment here. It makes me money. It doesn't make me money. It's more of like a passion project / business. I don't know if that's a good term to use, but it's definitely very personal for most of the families.
It's tied up with their identity,
right?
Surely, right?
Yeah.
And so that's I guess one of the main hallmarks of this kind of work. It's financially driven, but it's also legacy driven.
Right. Okay.
And then with agriculture, property taxes in California is a major consideration also. So in addition to all the federal like income tax or transfer taxes like your estate or gift tax, property tax is just like a huge planning issue.
Gotcha.
And so that's something we really focus on also.
Yeah.
And are you guys, and I don't know, maybe this, are you guys looking at like the inheritance tax that might be coming on board and like starting to do a little bit of planning for, hey, these aren't issues you guys have now, but there's a very high probability these are issues down the road, and some more advanced planning around there?
Yeah, thank you. That's actually kind of one of the bigger misconceptions we get is so at a federal level, a person can transfer like 22 million, or a couple can transfer 22 million at this point, right?
Yeah.
And that's fine.
Good problems to have if you have that problem.
If you're taxable now, and yes, then you've got some wealth. But like you're saying, the estate tax or the transfer tax, you called it an inheritance tax, right? This is going to take effect when a person dies. So it's not a question of like how much could you pass today, maybe, but what's it going to look like in the future? And so you have to look at, well, are assets going to appreciate in value? Are tax laws going to stay the same? You can never predict that. Right. The forecast is it's probably going to be worse for people trying to transfer substantial amounts. So there's proactive planning people should do now to really get the most benefit, even if they're not quote unquote taxable today.
Yeah. Sure.
So that's actually a huge part of the education process and giving options to people that can, hey, just day to day your life can be the same, but if you structure this a little differently, you're putting money in the bank in the future.
Gotcha.
So, cool. So yeah, definitely a focus area for us.
So can you kind of talk about some interesting? I'm sure you have an interesting story too about we'll stick with that wine business vein for the moment, but a transfer, an interesting story you had of a winery transferring over to next generation, and what were some of those considerations?
Just one example. So a notable family in Napa got a couple of really nice vineyard properties and a well-established, recognized wine name and label.
Yeah.
they've got a spouse that's not the parent of all the children. So father has some children, remarried. And now
that causes problems? Huh.
It's an issue. I won't say problems necessarily, but it could.
It comes up.
It's something to address.
A complication. A
wrinkle.
A wrinkle. There we go. Right? We'll call it a wrinkle.
I like that.
A wrinkle.
Yes, we'll call it a wrinkle.
So this particular family, they look to out-of-state trusts in South Dakota, where there's more favorable laws for the creator of a trust, as opposed to California, which is more favorable to the beneficiaries of a trust. And that gets to like what kind of information can a beneficiary demand and receive about a trust.
Gotcha.
And this particular client wanted to keep things very private at this point before letting the kids all sort of know how much value is there and get involved with the business. And so that's they went to South Dakota. It has better income tax laws if it ever comes to that. And the rule against perpetuities is a trust that could now last for hundreds of years instead of 90 years in California. So that's what this particular client did. One of the hallmarks of some of this planning is clients with these assets, they don't just want to give all their assets away, right? They rely on it for their own livelihood, and they want to stay in control of it.
Yes.
As long as they can. And so they want to get tax benefits and planning right now without giving up that other stuff entirely, right? They don't just want to give it away. And so by structuring this particular client into different trusts, I think they made one for each child and then a different one for the spouse.
Okay.
Client is able to maintain a level of control and still receive money from the trust.
Okay.
It was structured as a part gift, part sale to these particular trusts.
Perfect.
So maybe that's more detail than you want.
No, I love that. So
that's kind of the.
No, you can get more granular if you want to. If you want to go ahead and so let's jump back to why South Dakota? Why did the family decide to go to South Dakota? Go ahead and give some of the details.
So
on why South Dakota.
California is a a trust jurisdiction where there's a lot of kind of constraints. I guess there's restrictions on like when you can fund it. There's voidable transfer laws. So there's more favorable ones in Alaska, Delaware, South Dakota, Nevada. And when trusts are created there, the trust can last longer. There's fewer restrictions or requirements of what you have to tell beneficiaries. And so you get some forum shopping is what it's called.
Gotcha.
Where people will look for other jurisdictions. Non-California specific assets might be taxed at state levels or state tax levels in those other jurisdictions. So for example, a portfolio of marketable securities, not sourced in California necessarily. If it's in South Dakota, there's no state level income tax on that, right? So that's one advantage that they also look for.
Yeah.
And to do that, like just to clarify for everyone listening, you don't actually have to live in South Dakota to do that. You can live here, go to South,
But the weather's great in South Dakota. What?
I'll take your word for it.
Yeah.
And my early childhood was in Minnesota. I don't think it's too much better than Minnesota. It's still pretty bad.
Right on. That's a great point, actually. So the trust, it might need a local trustee, and there's trust companies that will be in South Dakota or Nevada that specialize, and really these states have drafted their laws to try to attract this sort of business.
Right.
And there's whole kind of cottage industries of trust services that have sprung up to help that.
Sure.
So it's maybe not as difficult as it might sound for a California person to create a South Dakota trust or a Nevada trust, have a local trust company act as the trustee, and you structure it under those laws.
Right.
And the devil is in the details with these sort of things, but yeah, you don't have to actually live there for this particular type of transaction.
Gotcha.
South Dakota probably knew that, and that's why they're like, "Hey, we need to make sure people can live somewhere else and still
still come here."
We laugh, but it's these laws in different states have been drafted, particularly to cater to out-of-state clientele that are looking for those benefits.
So what are some of the trust structures that you're talking about? I mean, and you can drop not names of people, but names of we're talking about dynastic trust, or what are some of the planning techniques that you guys are using?
Yeah, thank you. So there's kind of an alphabet soup of like acronyms that people
rattle them off. Go ahead. Yeah.
There's IDGITs,
Make yourself sound
there's
smart.
BEATITs, there's ILITs, there's GRATs, there's CUPIDs, there's all sorts of, and I guess fundamentally what these are getting at is conceptually, when you're making an irrevocable trust, you're putting the asset in there for estate tax purposes,
right?
Where you no longer own it.
Okay.
And I'll take an example, the IDGIT. That stands for a defective grantor trust,
okay,
irrevocable grantor trust. And anyway, what you're trying to do with those sort of trusts is take advantage of differences in the tax code where for estate taxes, you're not the owner, but for
Sure.
income taxes, you are the owner.
Okay.
And so what that allows is you can fund a trust, you can sell to a trust without triggering a bunch of capital gains because you're on both sides of the sale, right?
Okay.
You're selling
Yep.
to yourself for income tax purposes.
Okay.
But for estate tax purposes, you've made a transfer at maybe today's value, which are low, it appreciates over time, and at your death, it's already been transferred.
Right.
It's no longer in your estate and subject to estate, or you call it inheritance tax.
Right.
Got it.
And so, Jeff, one of the reasons we do this podcast is we're trying to get our business owners and some of the people that advise them.
Mm-hmm.
You have to do this planning early. You can't call. They can't call you. 2 weeks post close, or we're closing in a week on said deal. Hey, what can we do to avoid this XYZ, this tax implication? Right.
Yeah.
That's not how that works.
Yeah, I'll twist that a little bit.
Sure.
You can do planning anytime.
True.
But the best,
Right.
you'll get the most advantage if you can put some foresight into this
Right.
and get ahead of it. And it's, I guess the takeaway I'd hope people can know is like, you can do this, like it can be done. Just, starting the process is important, right?
Gotcha.
So for this particular technique, I'll go back to that client. He created the trusts for the children, for his spouse. He sold his winery brand to those trusts.
Right.
He now is being paid because he sold it to those trusts. He gets paid yearly on that promissory note obligation, right? And because he did it early, long before his death, every year that the trusts are making payments to him, he's chipping away at his own eventual estate tax exposure.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Perfect.
And if he had waited, you could still do some things, but it wouldn't be maybe as good.
That's good.
Right.
Right. Absolutely.
Or as beneficial.
Very cool.
So great point there.
Yeah. Because pre-planning is always better than post or at need planning.
Right.
So we're just always trying to encourage our clients to get stuff done, go do the research. Again, some of these techniques might not be, they're not for everybody, right? It depends on your family situation and what you're trying to accomplish. And some people want more control, some people want less control, some people need more income or less income. Some people are charitable, minded, some people aren't. There's like really 1,000 different considerations that you have to take into that. Mm-hmm. So it's not there's not like a one size fits all solution.
That's true. There's not. And I guess one thing I'd also like to convey here is that a lot of these estate tax plans are driven by an irrevocable trust of some kind, but irrevocable doesn't necessarily mean fixed forever, right?
Right.
The transfer, the funding of it might be fixed, but the terms can be modified through various techniques if they need to be fine-tuned by, there's a role in the trust called a trust protector, which is a non-fiduciary role that can have certain powers to fine-tune, and there's always court modifications, or now in California, what's called decanting, where you can essentially, just like in wine, you pour from one vessel to another. Decanting a trust, you're pouring.
Good wine analogy. I like that. That was a good one.
That's
wow.
literally what they call it. I didn't
we set
come
that
up
up for you perfect or what?
We actually had
They did
you
us a
just
favor.
so we could get that.
Yeah. Yes.
That's the soundbite for
Yeah.
us.
It is.
Right?
Yeah.
But yeah, same concept though, right? Assets that are in a trust where the terms aren't quite working can be poured into a new trust where the terms are better.
Which is good to know, because I know like we've run into some people that they get nervous, when they hear irrevocable, because they're just thinking, I've got a long ways to go. My kids have a long ways to go. I have no idea if I want this thing to change. And it does. At the first sound of it, it sounds like, oh, so I'm going to put this in writing, and then hands off, there it goes. We're just going to see how this vessel.
Right. And I think that decades past, I guess, that it's changed, right? Mm-hmm. The industry, we as practitioners have become better at explaining that and outlaying the options, because I think that used to be more of the plan, right? Is like, hey, let's just divide this up and start giving away parts of it, and once given away, it's lost. But now, more proactively, we want to structure this in trusts where, say, business owner, they're not taxable now, but they think there's a lot of potential with their business. It might grow a lot. They might structure this into an irrevocable trust today while the value is low, make a small transfer in, low values, let it appreciate outside of the person's estate in this irrevocable trust.
Okay.
A trust where they can still get some value. Maybe they create the trust for their spouse, and they can maintain some level of control over it too, right?
Right.
So again, it's the details and the fine tuning to make sure it's customized how the client wants. But yeah, there's tons of opportunities for the forward thinking type of business owner.
Yeah.
And not to turn to a bad note, but while we're kind of telling stories, do you have one of maybe like some people that came to you and they're like, hey, we need a lot of help, and you guys just all looked and you're like, this is now out of our hands and this is irreplaceable.
Or there's very little we can do.
Yeah, very
right?
little we can do.
Yeah, that is, and it doesn't sometimes always turn into a story because maybe for whatever reason, maybe they're not committed to actually making a decision or a plan,
Okay.
right? They might explore things, and they're the documents an attorney can prepare can't like solve all the family issues
Right.
that a family might have, right?
What?
It's
Or they would make even more money.
Yeah.
right. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
We'd have a whole other industry here.
Everyone would be writing checks like, you can solve my family's issues.
Great. Yeah.
Done.
Woo!
Yeah.
So sometimes it's if the client's ready and wants to do something, we can usually do something, but it's not. I'm not going to promise, a silver bullet cure all. Like,
Right.
hey, just hire us and all your tax problems go away. Right? There's certain techniques that do work and can help, and sometimes it's just not for everyone, or it doesn't work for the situation or the family.
I'm sure working, kind of in Napa and around the wine business, there's a lot of alcohol involved in some of those decisions. Good Cabernet, hopefully. But is there? Do you have a good story about where basically a family kind of imploded or things went really wrong because there was money involved and they didn't do some pre-planning and it kind of turned into kind of a disaster, and obviously not your fault because it wasn't pre-planning done.
Yeah. So, thank you. So, we do a lot of planning, right?
Sure.
Before a person passes away. So after a person's passed away, the legal work is called a trust administration.
Correct.
Right? Or an estate administration. And the dynamic of a family really changes once parents pass away, right?
No,
They've
everybody gets
kind of
along
been-
just fine.
Yeah, it's some old deep-seated things sometimes come up, and you get a lot of second guessing. So there's litigation firms that specialize in trust litigation. We do
Right.
some of that, but in this administration, so we have. I'll just share one, and some of this is public record, so I don't mind sharing.
Yeah.
So mother creates a trust. Great. There's some substantial wealth in it, mostly liquid assets. But in this case, she's got one daughter that she has relied on a lot for many years, and one son who has had some troubles in his life. And so through the years, as mom has worked on her estate plan and circumstances have changed, she has modified her plan, right, over time. And in those modifications, son, who has had problems, started getting different amounts, less and less, and some
Right.
restrictions to help him, right?
Right.
There's different types of trust, sometimes called a special needs trust, or
Right.
other type of spendthrift trust is another name for some of these. But it's basically a trust where instead of giving your heir or your child, a bunch of money outright, it's in a
Because they're
trust.
probably going to go hurt themselves probably
Yeah.
in some way, shape, or
For
right.
whatever reason, right?
Sure.
They could be taken advantage of by a spouse or by their friends or creditors, or so that's one reason. And then also maybe they just need protection from themselves,
Sure.
substance abuse, they have just financial money problems.
Right, yeah.
Right. So that's what happened here. Now that mom has passed away, though, son is now suing, of course, for all those modifications, and that's something you can maybe cure sometimes by the parents, talking about the plan and the reasoning. It wasn't really possible in this case, but that's kind of an example of, once parents are gone, things kind of rise to the surface.
Right.
And so hand in hand with actually getting the right documents in place is for the family. It's up to the client, of course, but educating the kids on maybe what the expectation should be and what the wishes that aren't expressed in the document are, as far as how things should move on in the future. So that's kind of one, maybe not example of something good that happened,
Right,
but
yeah.
an example of some of the problems that you try to address and make clear in the documents. I think.
So let's just kind of clear this up. So when a beneficiary thinks that he's owed something, or she, a family member, or any beneficiary, really doesn't have to necessarily be a family member. They could think that they're owed something, and they file a lawsuit against the trust. They go to the trust litigation world. Who are they actually suing?
It's so in litigation, you usually get a scatter shot.
Okay.
Everyone will be named,
Right.
and does 1 through 60 yet to be identified.
Okay.
So you get a lot of that in the pleadings.
Okay.
But here it would be, the trustee for mismanagement, and the daughter for influencing, things like that.
But
So
really, at the end-
it can be a laundry
But
list.
the point I'm getting to is like, who actually ends up losing is who's paying for all that litigation cost? Usually the estate, right? The trust.
It comes out of, right, exactly. So
you're kind of
sometimes hurts everyone.
Yeah,
right?
you're kind of suing yourself at the end of the day for all the things that you're doing, and you're just going to get less money. You're basically...
If everyone could get along, everyone would kind of have more money.
Yeah.
Usually.
Correct.
That's true. That's a good point.
Nobody wins in lawsuits. Really, they don't. I mean, I know there's always winners and losers, but at the end of the day, really, well, the attorneys always win. That's what we always say.
Yeah, well, we always win.
Yeah, the attorneys always get paid.
But I mean, that's actually, so I'm doing a plan right now. Client has a lot of wealth tied up in resorts, like winter resorts, like skiing, and summer resorts also, like watercraft rentals. A large amount of assets. The children know some, maybe not all of the details, right? So we're trying to plan it now, like how is this going to look in the future? Like what are the intentions for the assets? We're trying to keep this together so it can last for many generations.
Sure.
So we're putting in the restrictions and procedures for how are these assets managed in the future after parents are gone.
Right.
How can they be invested? When are distributions made out? How much should they be? And it's going to be a lot of careful drafting, I think, on my part, to make sure it's clear and unambiguous. I think, legal documents can be lengthy and boring.
Can be?
Just as
like,
and that's fine as long as they're not ambiguous, right? And that's all you're really going for. And sometimes it takes, 1,000 words to say it, but at the end of the day, you just try to make it clear. That's my job. And then the clients, they're going to have to work on managing the expectations for the kids in this. Some families, they want to do that. Some families want to just, hey, when I'm gone, then they can know. Okay. And, I've seen it work both ways. It's not like a right or wrong answer. It's for the family to decide, and we, can work with that and respect that.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Very cool.
So when making those decisions of like, hey, should we let them know early? Should we let them know, later? In the scenario where someone's getting less and less, have you guys experienced that where like maybe you see, just on your side a pending disaster or an abusive sibling, and you have to, how do you guys as, because you don't want to just be a drone that's just taking down notes and. You want to have that concierge service. How do you approach that topic that's really uncomfortable of like, hey, you may want to think about, X, Y, or Z, because, that is a big consideration when you do have someone with substance abuse. It's like, or any issue, gambling issue or something where it's like, though it may seem fair on paper, is it really fair that they're going to get this and destroy their life? Or how do you want your kids to move on?
No, that's a good point. The phrase a lot of attorneys use is equal is not necessarily fair, right? So you get all sorts of different provisions that might work for different clients. I'd say to your earlier point, meeting a client and developing the relationship, you start with that, but then you hopefully get it to a point where you can just, hey, I'm going to be frank here. Here's what's going to happen. Like when you die, hey, you're sick. You've got, this long. Let's just have the frank talk. Let's be clear here. Just, and one of those, hey, look, you've told me this person has these issues. Let's just talk about it. Let's get it out. You got to be candid, and have a relationship where you can be candid with your attorney and back and forth with the client. So sometimes just ripping the Band-Aid off, like, hey, we can't dance around this anymore. Let's hit this right on and just address it.
And you got fix this, or it's going to become a huge problem down the road.
Yeah.
Yeah. Gotcha.
And I heard the equal is not fair. So mom, dad, just so you know, equal's not fair. So if you want to throw dad's 1964 Gretsch guitar my way in the will, that'd be fine. I just want to make that clear.
Equal is not fair.
Equal is not fair.
Give it to Nathan.
No, don't.
Awesome. Thanks for joining us today. We're going to kind of wrap it up there. I'm going to let, we're kind of going to all give our closing thoughts. So Jeff, kind of what are the couple of the items that, people that listen to this podcast, if you're a business owner or have a high net worth family, or you advise high net worth families, what are some of the takeaways that you would kind of want them, to take away from today's podcast? Be like, hey, these are the things you need to remember.
Yeah. Thank you. So I guess the main thing I'd want to convey here is start the planning process early, and you can do this. It's not going to be too difficult. We'll work with you in it. Irrevocable trusts are not as scary as you might think. So getting in front of it can make all the difference and get the most advantage.
Yeah, it'll save some of those family fights and issues going down the road. Hopefully, you can't eliminate them, but you can reduce the impact on them. Would probably be the better statement.
I think you're doing everything you can that way.
There you go. Perfect. Yeah. I mean, I just think this is a really important topic for people to really consider, especially if you do have just any sort of wealth that you are going to transfer, because we've seen it time and time again. It always gets ugly at some point. Even the best, nicest families have some fights and issues, like over a 1964 guitar.
Yeah.
So,
another good takeaway is, again, irrevocable does not mean set in stone, and you can explore other states' advantageous laws, to do what's best for your family. So think about what's best for your family. Think about where that's going to take place, and make sure you have good legal counsel to make sure it gets executed.
Yeah. So Jeff, if somebody needs to contact you or your firm, they need this kind of advice, how can they get a hold of you?
Sure. Thank you. So the website is gvmlaw.com. That's like golf, Victor, Mike law.com. And I'm Jeff Stevens, J. Stevens, Stevens with a PH at gvmlaw.com here in Roseville on Douglas Boulevard.
That's PH like fat.
That's right.
PH like fat.
Yes. Well, thanks everybody for joining us today. We hope you learned something really good. We had some great trust talk, and also remember, anything that's said here should not be taken as tax, legal, or financial advice. If you're going to make any decisions, please consult a great attorney like Jeff Stevens at GVM Law, or contact us. We can put you in contact with some great resources before you're making those decisions. So please don't do anything without good advice. Thank you so much for joining us today on the Wealth Preservation Podcast. Make sure and hit us up on iTunes, on YouTube, subscribe to our channel. We put out podcasts multiple times a month. And thanks for everybody. Have a great day.